We're going to begin. This is the first lesson on trigonometry. Let's start off by defining parts of the right triangle that we have down here. We're going to start off with an angle, which is theta, and theta is going to be an acute angle. Now, we're always going to have a side that's directly across from theta, so we're going to call that opposite, and I've just abbreviated it there. And there's another side that touches the angle, and we'll call that adjacent. And then finally, we have the hypotenuse, and that is going to be opposite the right angle. So we need to know those three sides always. Now, there's a total of 6 functions, and if you can learn this acronym right here, SOHCAHTOA, then you can have all 6 of the trigonometric functions. So let's begin with sine. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, so I'm going to write opposite over hypotenuse. And then we have cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So let's say adjacent over hypotenuse. Then tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. Opposite over adjacent. So let's just see what that would look like in the triangle. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so that means I would take this side and divide it by this side. Cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, that means I would take this side and divide by this side. And then tangent is the opposite over the adjacent, so I would take this side and divide it by this side. So that covers 3 of the 6 trig functions. Now, notice I have these lined up. CSE is cosecant, and that we're just going to invert the fraction that goes with sine. So the cosecant is the hypotenuse divided by the opposite side. Secant, we're going to just invert the fraction that goes with cosine, so that is the hypotenuse divided by the adjacent side. And then for cotangent, we're going to invert the fraction that goes with tangent, and so that is just the adjacent side over the opposite side. Okay, so you may want to pause this and study over it. Fill your notes in, and then you'll be right along the way. So this is an example to find the values for all the 6 trig functions in the following triangle. If you think you're ready, you can pause and try this. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and start to answer it. So I want to know my adjacent, my opposite, and my hypotenuse. So if I look, right beside this angle is 12. So my adjacent is 12. And then coming across to the other side, my opposite side is 5. And then that leaves me with the hypotenuse right here. So I don't know the hypotenuse, but I can find it with the Pythagorean theorem. So Pythagorean theorem says 12 squared plus 5 squared is going to equal the hypotenuse squared. So the hypotenuse, I'm going to take a square root on both sides. So the hypotenuse is going to be the square root of 12 squared plus 5 squared. And 12 squared is 144, and then 5 squared is 25, so that's going to add to 169. And then the square root of 169 is 13. Okay, so I have now solved for the hypotenuse, and I'll go ahead and just label it right here on the diagram to be 13. So now we need to go through and set up our ratios. So I'm going to start out with sine. So sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, so it's 5 over 13. Now I'm going to immediately switch over here and do cosecant. So that's the reciprocal of 5 over 13, and it's going to be 13 over 5. So I've already done 2, and I'm on my way to being finished. Cosine is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse, so I'm talking about 12 over 13. And while we have that, let's go right over and finish secant. That's going to be 13 over 12. And just 2 more to go. So my tangent, it is the opposite over the adjacent. Tangent is opposite over the adjacent, so that's 5 over 12. And 5 over 12 is the tangent. All I need for cotangent is just to invert that. It's going to be 12 over 5. Okay. So we've just finished the first lesson for trigonometry.